My name is Lorraine Mitchell, and I'm 67 years old. For the past 5 years, everyone in my life, my ex-husband, my former business partners, my so-called friends, thought I was finished. Done. Washed up. A cautionary tale of a woman who'd lost everything and would never recover. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared them for the moment I walked into the grand ballroom at the National Business Excellence Awards, wearing a designer gown and my head held high, and heard the announcer say, "And the recipient of this year's Entrepreneur of the Decade Award for building a multi-million-dollar company from the ground up in just 5 years, Lorraine Mitchell, founder and CEO of Phoenix Rising Technologies." The room went silent, completely, utterly silent. I watched from my seat as my ex-husband Gerald's face went white, as my former business partner Catherine choked on her champagne, as the colleagues who'd written me off 5 years ago turned to stare at me in shock. Because they'd all been so sure I was destroyed, so certain that at 62 years old, after losing my company, my marriage, and my reputation, I'd never amount to anything again. They'd celebrated my downfall, spread rumors about how I'd failed, pitied the poor old woman who'd lost everything. And now, I was walking to that stage to accept the most prestigious award in our industry. As I stood up and smoothed my gown, I made eye contact with Gerald, the man who divorced me when I was at my lowest, who'd told me I was too old to start over. I smiled and headed toward the stage. But before I tell you how I got there, before I reveal what really happened to destroy me 5 years ago and how I rebuilt from nothing, I need you to do something for me right now. Hit that subscribe button. Click it right now. Then smash that like button, because this story is about to show you what happens when people count you out too soon. Turn on those notifications, that bell icon, because you need to see how a woman they thought was finished became more successful than she'd ever been. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. What city? What state? What country? I need to know who's here with me today, because what I did, rising from complete destruction to industry recognition in 5 years, it's going to show you that it's never too late, that age is just a number, that the people who doubt you deserve to watch you win. Now let me take you back 5 years. Let me tell you how a successful businesswoman ended up losing everything in one devastating year. To understand what happened, you need to understand who I was before the fall. I was Lorraine Mitchell, co-founder and CFO of Mitchell & Hart Technologies. My business partner Catherine Hart and I had built the company from scratch 20 years earlier. We specialized in software solutions for healthcare systems. We were successful, really successful. The company was worth about $50 million. We had 300 employees. We were respected in our industry. My personal life was good too. I'd been married to Gerald for 38 years. We had 2 adult children, James, who was 40, and Lisa, who was 37, 3 grandchildren. I had money, status, family, success, everything I'd worked for. And then, 5 years ago, it all came crashing down. It started with Catherine. She came to my office one morning looking nervous. "Lorraine, we need to talk about the company finances." "What about them?" "There's been an audit, random state business audit. They're looking at our books, and they found discrepancies." My blood ran cold. What kind of discrepancies? Missing money, about $3 million over the past 2 years. Money that was transferred out of company accounts to accounts in your name. "That's impossible. I didn't transfer anything." "The transactions have your digital signature, your authorization codes. Lorraine, it looks like you've been embezzling from the company." "I would never." I know you wouldn't, but the evidence is there, and the auditors are calling it fraud. They're reporting it to the authorities. I felt like the room was spinning. "Catherine, you know me. You've known me for 20 years. I didn't steal anything." "I believe you, but someone did, and they made it look like it was you." The investigation was swift and brutal. State auditors, federal investigators, lawyers, accountants, all of them looking at transfers that appeared to have my digital signature, my authorization, my approval. $3 million moved from company accounts, to offshore accounts linked to my name. Accounts I'd never opened, transactions I'd never authorized. But I couldn't prove it. "Mrs. Mitchell," the lead investigator said, "these transactions span 2 years. Are you claiming you never noticed $3 million leaving company accounts?" "I'm the CFO. I review the books. These transactions never showed up in any reports I saw." "Because they were hidden in subsidiary accounts, accounts you had access to." "I didn't hide anything." "Then how do you explain your digital signature on every transaction?" "I couldn't, because I didn't know how someone had forged my digital credentials." The board of directors at Mitchell and Hart held an emergency meeting. Catherine spoke on my behalf. "Lorraine has been my partner for 20 years. She's not a thief. Someone is framing her." But the board disagreed. They had evidence. They had documentation. They had a fiduciary duty to protect the company. They voted unanimously to terminate me, immediately. Not just terminated, sued. Mitchell and Hart Technologies filed a civil lawsuit against me for the full $3 million plus damages. My assets were frozen pending investigation. My shares in the company, worth about $15 million, were seized as potential proceeds of fraud. I was banned from the building. Security escorted me out with a box of personal belongings while my employees watched in shock. 20 years of work, gone in one day. The media covered it extensively. CFO accused of $3 million embezzlement. Healthcare tech company, executive charged with fraud. My name, my reputation, my face, all over the news as a criminal. Gerald was devastated, not by what happened to me, by the embarrassment. "How could you do this?" he demanded. "How could you steal from your own company?" "I didn't steal anything. I'm being framed." "The evidence says otherwise. Our friends are calling. Our neighbors are talking. Everyone knows. I can't show my face at the club." "Gerald, I need you. I need you to believe me." "I don't know what to believe anymore. All I know is you've destroyed our reputation, destroyed our family name." "I'm your wife. Doesn't that matter?" "You were my wife, but I can't stay married to a criminal." He filed for divorce 3 weeks later. After 38 years of marriage, Gerald walked away because he cared more about his reputation than about me. The divorce was quick and brutal. Because my assets were frozen, I had no access to money to fight him. He got the house, most of our savings, everything. I moved into a small apartment with the little money I'd managed to hide before the freeze. About $30,000. My children were divided. James believed me. "Mom, I know you didn't steal anything. We'll fight this. We'll prove you're innocent." But Lisa believed her father. "Mom, just admit what you did. Take a plea deal. Stop embarrassing the family." I didn't do anything. "Then how do you explain the evidence? Mom, you're 62 years old. You're too old to go to prison. Just admit it and move on." Too old, that phrase again. The criminal investigation dragged on for months. Meanwhile, I hired a lawyer with my dwindling savings. He reviewed the evidence. "Lorraine, this is bad. The digital trail is extensive. Your credentials were used for every transaction." "Someone stole my credentials." "Can you prove that? Can you show how or when they were compromised?" "No, but I didn't do this." "I believe you, but belief doesn't win cases. We need proof. And right now, all the proof points to you." "So what do I do?" "We can go to trial, but if we lose, you're looking at 10 years in federal prison. Or you can take a plea deal, admit to reduced charges, probably serve 2 to 3 years. Admit to something I didn't do. Or risk 10 years if convicted at trial." I spent weeks agonizing over that decision. Finally, I decided to fight, to go to trial, to clear my name. The trial was 6 months later. The prosecution presented their case, detailed financial records showing transactions with my digital signature, expert testimony about the security of the digital authorization system, evidence that I'd been the only person with access to these accounts. My lawyer presented our defense. I was being framed. Someone had stolen my credentials. I had no motive to steal. I was already wealthy. But we couldn't prove how my credentials were stolen. We couldn't identify who did it. We couldn't show any evidence of framing beyond my word. The jury deliberated for 2 days. Guilty. Guilty on all counts of wire fraud and embezzlement. The judge sentenced me to 5 years in federal prison. 5 years. At 62 years old, I was going to prison for a crime I didn't commit. My lawyer immediately filed an appeal. We'll fight this. We'll find new evidence. We'll. With what money? I'm broke. My assets are all frozen or seized. I can't afford to keep fighting. Then what do you want to do? I sat in that courtroom, devastated, and I made a decision. I want to serve my time, and when I get out, I want to find out who really did this, and I want to destroy them. I reported to federal prison 3 weeks later. My children were there to say goodbye. Even Lisa had softened a bit, realizing her mother was actually going to prison. "Mom, I'm sorry I didn't believe you," she said, crying. "But you'll be out in 3 years with good behavior. You can still have a life after this." "I know, baby. Take care of your brother." Gerald didn't come. We were divorced by then. He'd already moved on, dating a woman 15 years younger who worked at his law firm. Prison was exactly as terrible as you'd imagine. I was the oldest woman in my unit. Most of the other inmates were in their 20s and 30s. I didn't fit in. I didn't belong. But I survived, day by day, week by week. And I used that time to think, to plan, to figure out how I'd been framed and by whom. I reviewed everything in my mind, every transaction, every access point, every person who could have had access to my credentials. And slowly, a theory started forming. Catherine, my business partner, my supposed friend. She was the only other person who had access to the systems I'd used. The only person who could have cloned my digital credentials without me noticing. But why would she frame me? We were partners. We'd built the company together. Unless she wanted me out, wanted to take full control of the company. If I was removed and my shares seized, who would get them? The board could distribute them, sell them, or award them to the remaining founder. Catherine. By framing me, Catherine would gain complete control of a company worth $50 million. I served 3 years of my sentence, got out early for good behavior. I was 65 years old, with no money, no home, no job, and a criminal record. Everyone I'd known before prison had written me off. My former colleagues didn't return my calls. My friends had distanced themselves. Even James, who'd believed in my innocence, had moved across the country for a job and rarely called anymore. I was alone, broke, with a felony conviction. Most people would have given up at that point. But I wasn't most people. I rented a room in a boarding house with the little money I had saved before prison. Got a job at a grocery store stocking shelves at night. It was the only job I could get with a criminal record. And I started investigating. I spent my days at the library using free computers to research, to dig into Mitchell and Hart technologies, to find evidence that Catherine had framed me. It took me 6 months of research before I found it. A former IT employee from Mitchell and Hart had posted on a tech forum about suspicious administrative access he'd noticed years ago, about how someone had been accessing systems using cloned credentials, about how he'd reported it to management and been told to drop it. I tracked him down. His name was Marcus Chen. He was working for a different company now. "Marcus, you posted about suspicious access at Mitchell and Hart Technologies 5 years ago. What did you see?" He looked nervous. "I don't want to get involved. I'm the person who went to prison for embezzlement, but I didn't do it, and I think you know something that can prove it." He hesitated. Then, I saw evidence that someone had cloned CFO credentials, digital signatures that didn't match the encryption patterns of legitimate signatures. I reported it to Catherine Hart. She told me to delete the evidence and never speak of it again. "Do you have any proof?" "I kept copies, just in case. I knew something wasn't right. He gave me flash drives with the original IT logs, evidence showing that my digital credentials had been cloned, evidence that Catherine had ordered it covered up. I took that evidence to the FBI. This proves I was framed. This proves Catherine Hart embezzled the money and pinned it on me. The agent reviewed the evidence. This is compelling. We'll need to investigate. But Ms. Mitchell, if this is true, you were wrongfully convicted. I know. I've been saying that for 5 years. The FBI reopened the investigation, this time focused on Catherine. They found more evidence. Digital trails showing Catherine had been the one moving money, accounts in offshore banks under shell companies she controlled, proof that she deliberately framed me to take control of the company. 6 months after I'd brought them the evidence, Catherine Hart was arrested. For embezzlement, fraud, and obstruction of justice. The same charges I'd been convicted of, but she actually did it. The news was everywhere. Tech CEO arrested for framing business partner. Woman wrongly imprisoned after partner's deception. My conviction was vacated. I was officially exonerated. But exoneration doesn't give you back the years you lost, the reputation destroyed, the relationships broken. I was 66 years old. No job, no money, no company. Starting over from less than nothing. Most people thought I was done, finished, too old and too broken to rebuild. Including Gerald, who I ran into at a coffee shop 3 months after my exoneration. Lorraine, I heard about what happened, that you were innocent. Yes, I was, like I told you 5 years ago. I'm sorry, I should have believed you. Yes, you should have. Are you doing okay? I'm surviving, working on something new. At your age, Lorraine, you're almost 70. Maybe it's time to just retire, accept what happened and move on. Move on? Gerald, I lost 5 years of my life to prison. I lost my company, my reputation, my marriage, because someone framed me, and you want me to just move on. I'm just saying, you're too old to start a new company. Watch me. I walked away from him, and I made a vow. I was going to rebuild, better than before, bigger than before, and I was going to make everyone who doubted me watch. That's when I started Phoenix Rising Technologies. With $10,000 I'd saved from my grocery store job and my exoneration settlement, I started a company. I couldn't compete with Mitchell and Hart directly. They were too established, too big. But I knew the industry. I knew what healthcare systems needed, and I knew that technology had evolved in the 5 years I'd been in prison. I specialized in AA-powered healthcare solutions, cutting-edge technology that Mitchell and Hart hadn't adopted yet. I worked from my tiny rented room, coded late into the night, taught myself new programming languages, built prototypes. At 66 years old, I was learning things most people half my age found difficult. But I was motivated, not just by success, by revenge. I wanted Catherine to see what I'd built. I wanted Gerald to regret leaving me. I wanted everyone who'd written me off to know they'd been wrong. My first client was a small rural hospital. They paid me $15,000 for a basic AI diagnostic tool. I used that money to improve my product, to market to other small hospitals. Within a year, I had 20 clients, revenue of $500,000. I hired my first employee, then my second, then my 10th. By year 3, Phoenix Rising Technologies had 50 employees and $5 million in revenue. Healthcare systems that had ignored me when I was at Mitchell and Hart were now calling me, wanting my innovative AI solutions. By year 4, we were at $20 million in revenue. And by year 5, 5 years after being released from prison, we were at $45 million in revenue. I'd built a multi-million-dollar company in 5 years, at an age when most people are retired. And nobody knew. I'd kept a low profile deliberately. No press, no publicity, just quiet, steady growth. Until the National Business Excellence Awards. Someone had nominated Phoenix Rising Technologies for Entrepreneur of the Decade. I'd been selected as a finalist without even knowing. And then I'd won. Which brought me to tonight. Standing up in that ballroom, walking to the stage, watching everyone's faces as they realized who I was. Lorraine Mitchell, the woman they'd thought was finished. As I reached the stage and took the award from the presenter, I looked out at the audience. At Gerald, sitting with his young wife looking sick. At former colleagues who'd abandoned me, looking shocked. At Catherine's empty seat, she was in prison, serving 10 years for the fraud she'd committed. I held up the award and smiled. Thank you for this incredible honor. 5 years ago, I was released from prison for a crime I didn't commit. Everyone thought I was done, too old, too broken, too far gone to ever recover. I paused, looking directly at Gerald. They were wrong, and this award proves it. The audience erupted in applause. But as I walked off the stage, award in hand, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A man in the back of the room, watching me, taking pictures. I recognized him. He'd been one of Catherine's lawyers during her trial. And he was smiling, like he knew something I didn't. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the notification bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I walked off the stage, gripping my award, trying to maintain my composure while keeping my eyes on the man in the back of the ballroom. But by the time I reached my seat, he was gone. Had I imagined it? Was I being paranoid? A hand touched my shoulder. I jumped. Lorraine, congratulations. It was James, my son. He'd flown in from Seattle for the ceremony. Mom, I'm so proud of you, after everything you've been through. Thank you, honey. Did you see a man in the back? Dark suit, gray hair, taking pictures. I wasn't paying attention to anyone but you. Why? I thought I recognized him. It's probably nothing. But it wasn't nothing. I could feel it. The rest of the evening was a blur of congratulations, photos, and people who suddenly wanted to be associated with my success. People who'd ignored me for 5 years were now my old friends. I smiled and made polite conversation, but my mind was elsewhere. Who was that man? And why was Catherine's lawyer at my award ceremony? After the event, I went back to my hotel room and immediately called Marcus Chen, the IT specialist who'd helped prove Catherine framed me. Marcus, I need you to look into something. Catherine's legal team. Specifically, a lawyer who worked on her defense. Gray hair, 50s, dark suit. That could be any of them. Do you have a name? No, but he was at the business awards tonight, taking pictures of me. It felt wrong. I'll dig into it. Catherine's trial is a matter of public record. I can pull up her legal team and cross-reference with anyone who might have been at your event. Thank you, and Marcus, be careful. If Catherine's people are watching me, they might be watching you too. After I hung up, I sat on my hotel bed, staring at the award. Entrepreneur of the Decade. I'd worked so hard for this, built a company from nothing, proved everyone wrong. But the victory felt hollow with that man's smile haunting me. The next morning, I flew back to my office, a beautiful space in a renovated downtown building. Phoenix Rising Technologies occupied 3 floors now, 52 employees, 15 major clients. My assistant, Angela, greeted me at the door. Ms. Mitchell, congratulations. The award is all over the news. We've already had 12 calls from potential new clients. That's wonderful. Angela, hold all my calls for an hour. I need to catch up on some things. I went into my office and closed the door. Marcus called 20 minutes later. Lorraine, I found your mystery man. His name is Richard Brennan. He was Catherine's lead defense attorney during her fraud trial. Why would he be at my award ceremony? That's the interesting part. Brennan isn't just a lawyer, he's also a private investigator. And according to some digging I did, he's been asking questions about you, about Phoenix Rising Technologies, about your finances. My stomach dropped. Why? I don't know, but Lorraine, there's more. Catherine filed an appeal last month. Her lawyers are claiming new evidence. Evidence that supposedly proves she was set up too. That's impossible. We proved she embezzled the money. I know, but her legal team is arguing that someone else orchestrated the whole thing, that both you and Catherine were victims of a larger scheme. That's absurd. Marcus, I was in prison for 3 years. Catherine stole $3 million and framed me. The evidence was clear. I'm just telling you what they're claiming. And Lorraine, if they're investigating you, if they're building a case that somehow implicates you again, you need to be prepared. Prepared for what? For them to try to destroy everything you've rebuilt. After Marcus hung up, I sat at my desk, my mind racing. Catherine was appealing, claiming she was set up, sending investigators after me. This couldn't be happening again. I called my lawyer, Patricia Simmons, who'd helped with my exoneration. Patricia, I need to see you. Today, it's urgent. What's wrong? Catherine Hart is appealing her conviction, and her lawyers are investigating me. 2 hours later, I was in Patricia's office, explaining everything. Richard Brennan was at the awards ceremony, taking pictures, looking smug, and now I find out Catherine's claiming she was framed too. Patricia reviewed her files. The appeal was filed 3 weeks ago. They're arguing that the evidence against Catherine was circumstantial, that someone else had access to both your credentials and hers, that there's a third party involved. There is no third party. Catherine framed me. I know, but Lorraine, appeals work differently than trials. They don't need to prove innocence. They just need to show reasonable doubt. If they can cast doubt on Catherine's conviction, her sentence could be reduced or overturned. And if her conviction is overturned, what happens to mine? Your exoneration stands. The evidence proved you were framed. But what? But if they can prove someone else orchestrated both frauds, both you and Catherine could be seen as victims, which means the real perpetrator is still out there, and you'd be back under scrutiny. I can't go through this again. I can't. Then we need to be proactive. We need to find out what Brennan is investigating and shut it down before it becomes a problem. Over the next 2 weeks, I tried to focus on running my company, but it was impossible. Every time I saw an unfamiliar car outside my office, I wondered if it was Brennan. Every time my phone rang, I worried it was the FBI reopening my case. Every time a journalist requested an interview about my award, I worried they'd ask about the embezzlement. My son James called with concerning news. Mom, I got a weird call today from a private investigator asking questions about you, about your finances when you started Phoenix Rising, about where you got the money to start the company. What did you tell them? Nothing, I hung up. But Mom, why are they asking about your startup capital? Because they're trying to build a case that I used stolen money to start my company. Did you? No, James, I started with $10,000 from working at a grocery store. Everything after that was legitimate business revenue. Every penny is documented. Then you have nothing to worry about. But I did worry, because I knew how these things worked. They didn't need proof. They just needed to create enough doubt to destroy my reputation again. 2 days later, a story appeared in a business journal. Entrepreneur of the Decade award winner faces questions about company funding sources. The article was carefully worded. No direct accusations. Just questions about how a woman fresh out of prison with a criminal record, conveniently mentioning that detail before knotting my exoneration, had managed to start a multi-million-dollar company so quickly. The implication was clear. I must have had money hidden somewhere, money from the original embezzlement. My phone started ringing immediately. Clients calling to ask if the allegations were true. Investors worried about Phoenix Rising's reputation. Employees concerned about their jobs. I called an emergency staff meeting. I know you've all seen the article. I want to address it directly. 5 years ago, I was wrongly convicted of embezzlement. I spent 3 years in prison for a crime I didn't commit. After my release and exoneration, I built Phoenix Rising Technologies from nothing. Every dollar of funding is documented and legitimate. Anyone who questions that is welcome to review our complete financial records. My CFO, Stephen, spoke up. Ms. Mitchell, should we be worried if there's another investigation? There won't be another investigation, because there's nothing to investigate. This is a smear campaign by people who want to destroy what I've built. We're not going to let them. But privately, I was terrified. That evening, I got a call from an unknown number. Ms. Mitchell, this is Richard Brennan. I think we should talk. I have nothing to say to you. Not even about the $3 million that's still missing. I froze. Catherine stole that money. Did she? Ms. Mitchell, I've been investigating this case for 6 months. And I've found some interesting discrepancies. Catherine was convicted of embezzling $3 million. But according to my analysis, only $2.1 million was ever recovered from her accounts. That leaves $900,000 unaccounted for. I don't know anything about that. Don't you? Ms. Mitchell, you started your company with $10,000. But within your first year, you had access to enough capital to hire 10 employees, rent office space, and develop sophisticated AI technology. The math doesn't add up. Every penny came from business revenue. Prove it. Meet with me. Show me your financial records. If everything is legitimate like you claim, you have nothing to hide. I'm not meeting with you. If you have accusations, make them officially. Otherwise, stop harassing me. I hung up, my hands shaking. $900,000 unaccounted for. That couldn't be right. The FBI had recovered all the stolen money from Catherine's accounts, hadn't they? I called Marcus Chen again. Marcus, I need you to pull the complete records from Catherine's trial, specifically the financial recovery. How much money was actually recovered from her accounts? Why? Just do it, please. 2 days later, Marcus called back. Lorraine, you're not going to like this. Brennan is right. The FBI recovered $2.1 million from Catherine's offshore accounts, but the original embezzlement was $3 million. There's $900,000 that was never found. Where did it go? I don't know. The prosecution argued that Catherine had spent it or hidden it in accounts that couldn't be traced. The jury convicted her anyway based on the evidence they had. But Lorraine, if Brennan can prove that money went somewhere else, somewhere connected to you, you're in serious trouble. I never touched that money. I don't even know where it is. I believe you, but you need to find it before Brennan does. Because if he finds it first and can link it to you in any way, your exoneration won't matter. You'll be right back where you started. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, trying to figure out where $900,000 could have gone. Catherine had stolen it. That much was proven. But if she didn't keep all of it, where did it go? And then I remembered something. Something from 5 years ago, right before I was arrested. A conversation with Gerald, my then-husband. We'd been arguing about money. About how I didn't contribute enough to our household expenses because I was too focused on the company. And Gerald had said something strange. Maybe if you paid more attention to our finances, you'd notice where money actually goes. At the time, I'd thought he was just being petty, but what if he'd meant something else? What if Gerald had known about the embezzlement? What if he'd been involved? No, that was crazy. Gerald was a lawyer, a respected professional. He wouldn't risk his career on embezzlement. But he'd divorced me awfully quickly when I was arrested, like he couldn't wait to distance himself. And he'd taken most of our assets in the divorce, assets I couldn't fight for because my accounts were frozen. Assets that could have included hidden money. The next morning, I called Patricia. I need you to investigate my ex-husband, Gerald Mitchell, specifically his finances from 5 years ago, right around the time of my arrest. Why? Because I think he might have been involved in the embezzlement, and I think he might have that missing $900,000. Lorraine, that's a serious accusation. I know, but I need to know. Because if Gerald has that money, if he was part of Catherine's scheme to frame me, then I can prove I had nothing to do with it. Investigating your ex-husband's finances from 5 years ago is going to be expensive. I don't care, do it, whatever it costs. Over the next 3 weeks, Patricia's investigators dug into Gerald's financial history. Meanwhile, Richard Brennan kept making my life miserable. Another article appeared. Questions mount about Phoenix Rising Technologies founder's mysterious funding. 3 of my clients canceled their contracts, citing concerns about the company's reputation. My board of directors called an emergency meeting to discuss whether I should step down as CEO until the questions were resolved. Step down from the company I built. Just temporarily, one board member said, until this blows over. It won't blow over if I step down. It'll look like an admission of guilt. I'm not going anywhere. But the pressure was mounting. Employees were worried. Clients were calling. Investors were nervous. Phoenix Rising Technologies, my comeback, my redemption, my proof that I wasn't finished, was in danger of collapsing. All because of that missing $900,000. On a Friday afternoon, Patricia called with news. Lorraine, we found something. Gerald opened several new investment accounts right after your arrest. Accounts funded with approximately $850,000 in cash deposits. Where did he say the money came from? Inheritance from a distant relative who died. But we can't find any record of this relative or the inheritance. So Gerald has the money. Gerald was involved. It looks that way. But Lorraine, here's the problem. If we expose Gerald, we expose the fact that you were married to him when the embezzlement happened. Brennan will argue that you and Gerald worked together, that you've been in on it the whole time. But that's not true. I know, but proving it will be difficult, and in the meantime, your company suffers. So what do I do? We need more evidence. We need to prove that Gerald and Catherine worked together without your knowledge. We need to show exactly how they framed you and stole the money. How do we do that? I'm working on it, but Lorraine, this is going to get worse before it gets better. Brennan is planning something big. I can feel it. She was right. 2 days later, Catherine Hart's appeal hearing was scheduled. And according to the court documents Patricia obtained, Catherine's lawyers were planning to call me as a witness. They wanted me to testify about the embezzlement, about my relationship with Gerald, about where I got the money to start Phoenix Rising Technologies. They were going to put me on trial all over again. And this time, with my successful company and my prestigious award, I had even more to lose. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks from now. 3 weeks to prepare. 3 weeks to find evidence that would clear me and expose Gerald. 3 weeks to save everything I'd built. I called an emergency, meeting with my leadership team. I need to be honest with you all. In 3 weeks, I'm testifying in Catherine Hart's appeal hearing. Her lawyers are going to try to implicate me in the original embezzlement. The media will cover it extensively. Our clients will be watching. Our reputation is on the line. Stephen, my CFO, asked, "What do you need from us?" "I need you to keep this company running while I fight this battle. I need you to reassure clients, to keep employees focused, to show the world that Phoenix Rising Technologies is bigger than any one person, even its founder." "We can do that," Angela said. "But Ms. Mitchell, you need to know we all believe in you, everyone in this company. We know you built this legitimately. We know you're innocent, and we're going to stand by you." I felt tears forming. Thank you, all of you. That evening, I sat alone in my office, looking at my Entrepreneur of the Decade award on the shelf. They thought I was finished, when I was arrested, when I was convicted, when I was released from prison with nothing. They thought I was done. And for a while, I'd almost believed them. But I'd rebuilt. I'd come back stronger than ever. And now, facing another false accusation, another attempt to destroy me, I had a choice. I could step back, protect the company by distancing myself, let them win. Or I could fight, expose the truth, clear my name once and for all. I picked up my phone and called Patricia. "Set up a press conference. For tomorrow, I'm going to tell my side of the story, all of it, before Catherine's lawyers can control the narrative." Are you sure that's wise? No, but I'm done being passive. I'm done letting other people define my story. Tomorrow, I'm taking control. The next morning, I stood at a podium in front of 30 journalists, cameras, and microphones. And I told them everything. About being framed by Catherine, about my wrongful conviction, about discovering Gerald's involvement, about the missing $900,000, about building Phoenix rising from nothing. I've been asked where I got the money to start my company, I said, looking directly into the cameras. I'll tell you. I started with $10,000 earned from working night shifts at a grocery store while wearing an ankle monitor. Every additional dollar came from legitimate business revenue. Every transaction is documented. Every penny is accounted for. And if anyone, Catherine Hart's lawyers, Richard Brennan, or any journalist, wants to review those records, they're welcome to, because I have nothing to hide. What about the missing $900,000? A reporter asked. I believe that money is in my ex-husband Gerald Mitchell's possession, and I believe he and Catherine Hart conspired to steal it and frame me. I'm calling for a full investigation into Gerald's finances and his connection to the original embezzlement. The room erupted with questions. But I'd said what I needed to say. I'd taken control of my story. As I walked off the platform, my phone rang. It was Marcus. Lorraine, you need to get somewhere safe, right now. What? Why? I just got a call from a contact at the FBI. They're reopening the investigation. Into you. Gerald made a deal with prosecutors. He's claiming you were the mastermind behind everything. That you used both him and Catherine to steal the money. And he says he has proof. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I stood frozen in the conference room, my phone pressed to my ear, as Marcus's words echoed in my mind. What kind of proof? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I don't know, but Lorraine, Gerald's lawyers contacted the U.S. Attorney's Office this morning, right after your press conference. They're claiming he has documents, recordings, something that shows you orchestrated the entire embezzlement scheme. That's impossible. I didn't orchestrate anything. I believe you, but if Gerald has manufactured evidence, if he's convincing enough, this could be bad, really bad. Patricia appeared at my side. She'd overheard the conversation. Hang up with Marcus. We need to strategize, now. I ended the call and followed Patricia to a private conference room. Gerald is claiming he has proof you masterminded the embezzlement, she asked. Apparently. What kind of proof could he possibly have? You didn't do it. I don't know, but Patricia, Gerald was a lawyer, a good one. If anyone could fabricate convincing evidence, it's him. Then we need to get ahead of this. We need to figure out what he might have and how to discredit it before the prosecutors see it. How do we do that? We talk to Gerald, directly, see what he's planning, see if we can catch him in a lie. He won't talk to me. We haven't spoken in 4 years. Then we make him talk to you. We use the one thing he cares about, his reputation. We threaten to expose his involvement unless he meets with us. It was risky, but I was out of options. Patricia sent a message to Gerald's lawyer. We have evidence of Mr. Mitchell's involvement in the embezzlement scheme. If he wants to avoid being charged as a co-conspirator, he should meet with us to discuss a resolution. The response came 2 hours later. Mr. Mitchell will meet with Ms. Mitchell tomorrow at 2 p.m. Neutral location. Lawyers present. The meeting was set at a downtown law office. Neutral territory. I arrived with Patricia. Gerald arrived with 2 lawyers. He looked older, grayer, but still arrogant. Lorraine, he said coldly, I heard about your press conference, accusing me of embezzlement. That was bold. You have $850,000 in accounts that you can't explain. Money that appeared right after I was arrested. Where did it come from, Gerald? An inheritance, which is none of your business. From a relative who doesn't exist. We checked. Gerald's lawyer intervened. Mrs. Mitchell, you're here to discuss a resolution, not make accusations. Then let's discuss it, Patricia said. You claim to have evidence that Lorraine orchestrated the embezzlement. Show us. Gerald smiled, a cruel, satisfied smile. I have recordings. Conversations between Lorraine and Catherine from 5 years ago, discussing the embezzlement, planning how to move the money, how to hide it. My blood ran cold. That's impossible. I never had those conversations. The recordings say otherwise, and I have them authenticated by a forensic audio expert. Your voice, Catherine's voice, clear as day. Recordings can be faked. These weren't, they're real, and they prove you were involved. When were these conversations supposedly recorded? Patricia asked. Over a 6-month period, starting 8 months before Lorraine was arrested. I thought back to that time, 8 months before my arrest. I'd been at Mitchell and Hart, working normally, having normal business conversations with Catherine. Had Gerald somehow recorded my conversations, and then edited them to sound incriminating? I want to hear these recordings, Patricia demanded. You will, in court, along with the prosecutors and the judge. If you really have proof Lorraine was guilty, why didn't you come forward 5 years ago? Patricia challenged. Because I was protecting my wife, but she's not my wife anymore. And when she accused me publicly yesterday of embezzlement, she ended any loyalty I had left. So now the truth comes out. The truth, I said slowly, is that you and Catherine worked together. You helped her frame me, and now you're trying to frame me again to cover your own involvement. Prove it, Gerald said. Because I have recordings, what do you have? I looked at this man I'd been married to for 38 years. The man who'd abandoned me when I needed him most. The man who was now trying to destroy me completely. I have the truth, and eventually that always wins. We'll see. The prosecutor's office is reviewing my evidence tomorrow. I expect they'll be filing new charges against you by the end of the week. The meeting ended. Patricia and I left in silence. In her car, she finally spoke. If those recordings are real, they're not real, or they're taken out of context, or they're edited. Gerald wouldn't have kept them hidden for 5 years if they were actually proof of my guilt. He's bluffing. But what if he's not? Then we need to prove the recordings are fake. Can we do that? Maybe, if we can get access to them. If we can find the original source files, metadata, anything that shows manipulation. But Lorraine, that takes time. And you said prosecutors are reviewing the evidence tomorrow. Then we have 24 hours to figure this out. I called Marcus as soon as I got home. Marcus, Gerald claims to have recordings of me and Catherine discussing the embezzlement. Is there any way to prove recordings are fake? Depends on how they were made. If they're edited or synthesized, there are usually digital fingerprints. But I'd need access to the files. Can you get them? Not legally. They're evidence in an active investigation. Then get them illegally. Marcus, I'm facing another false accusation, another trial, possibly more prison time. I don't care about legality anymore. I care about the truth. Lorraine. Please, you helped me once before, help me again. He was quiet for a long moment. I'll see what I can do. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced my apartment, thinking about those recordings. What conversations could Gerald have recorded? What had I said that he could twist into something incriminating? At 3 a.m., my phone rang. Marcus. I got them, Gerald's recordings. 6 audio files supposedly spanning 6 months. How did you? Don't ask, but Lorraine, you need to hear these, because they sound really convincing. He sent me the files. I listened to the first one. It was my voice, definitely my voice, talking to Catherine. We need to move the money before anyone notices. Catherine's response, how much? My voice again, at least 3 million, maybe more. I felt sick. It sounded exactly like a conversation about embezzlement. But I'd never said those words, at least not in that context. I listened more carefully. The audio was slightly choppy, like it had been edited. Marcus, these are spliced together. Different conversations edited to sound like one. I know, I'm analyzing them now. And you're right, The metadata shows heavy editing, but it's sophisticated. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. Can you prove it was edited? I can prove the files were manipulated, but proving what the original conversations were about, that's harder. Gerald could claim he just cleaned up audio quality, not that he changed the meaning. So even if we prove the recordings are edited, it might not be enough. It might not be, unless we can find the original, unedited recordings and show what you were actually discussing. Where would those be? If Gerald recorded these conversations, he did it somehow without you knowing. Hidden microphones, phone taps. Do you remember where these conversations might have taken place? I listened to the recordings again, trying to remember. There was background noise in some of them, office sounds, phones ringing, people talking in the distance. These were recorded at the Mitchell and Hart offices. I can hear the environment. Then the original recordings might still exist somewhere, on a server, in a backup system, if we can access the building's old security or communication systems. The building was sold 2 years ago. Mitchell and Hart moved to a new location. But servers might still be archived somewhere. Let me make some calls. While Marcus investigated, I listened to all 6 recordings. They were damning. Conversations about moving money, hiding assets, avoiding detection. But I remembered these conversations now. We'd been talking about legitimate business operations. We need to move the money before anyone notices. Had been about transferring funds between accounts to take advantage of better interest rates. At least $3 million had been the amount we were moving for investment purposes. Gerald had taken real conversations about normal business operations and edited them to sound like embezzlement planning. It was brilliant and terrifying. Because how do you prove what you meant when you said something? How do you provide context for words that, out of context, sound guilty? The next morning, Patricia called with bad news. The U.S. Attorney's Office has scheduled a meeting with Gerald's lawyers. They're reviewing the evidence this afternoon. Lorraine, we need a counter-strategy. Now. Marcus is trying to prove the recordings are edited, but it's taking time. We don't have time. The meeting is in 3 hours. Then I need to be there. I need to explain what those conversations were actually about. They might not let you attend. Make them let me attend. Patricia, if I don't defend myself right now today, I'm going to be arrested by tomorrow. Patricia made calls, pulled strings, called in favors. Finally, you can attend, but Lorraine, be careful. Anything you say can and will be used against you. 3 hours later, I sat in a conference room at the U.S. Attorney's Office. Present, Assistant U.S. Attorney David Morrison, Gerald and his 2 lawyers, Patricia, and me. Morrison played the first recording. My voice. We need to move the money before anyone notices. He stopped the playback. Ms. Mitchell, can you explain this conversation? That conversation was about moving company funds between investment accounts. It was a legitimate business decision. Catherine and I were trying to maximize returns on our cash reserves. Why would you need to move money before anyone noticed if it was legitimate? Because we were moving a significant amount, $3 million, and we wanted to have everything properly documented before the board meeting where we'd present the decision. Before anyone notices meant before the board saw the transaction and had questions. We wanted to have all our documentation ready. Gerald's lawyer interrupted. That's a convenient explanation. How do we know that's what you really meant? Because that's what I said. Your client edited these recordings to remove the context and make innocent conversations sound guilty. Morrison played another recording. My voice. This has to stay between us. Nobody else can know. Catherine, understood, I'll make sure of it. And this, Morrison asked. I don't remember the specific conversation, but I can guess. Catherine and I were working on a confidential acquisition. We were trying to buy a smaller company, and we needed to keep it secret until the deal was finalized. Standard business practice. Do you have documentation of this acquisition? I don't know. That was 5 years ago. Catherine would have had those files. How convenient. The only person who could verify your story is the person you claim framed you. Patricia spoke up. Mr. Morrison, these recordings have been heavily edited. We have a forensic analysis showing multiple cuts and splices. They're not reliable evidence. I have a forensic expert who says they're authentic, Gerald's lawyer countered. Authentic doesn't mean accurate. These are real recordings of real conversations, but they've been manipulated to change their meaning. Morrison looked frustrated. Here's what I see: recorded conversations that sound incriminating, an explanation from Ms. Mitchell that can't be verified, and a history of embezzlement charges. Ms. Mitchell, you were convicted 5 years ago. Wrongfully convicted. I was exonerated. After serving 3 years. Now your ex-husband is claiming you were actually guilty, and he has evidence to support it. My ex-husband has fabricated evidence, and he has a motive. He's trying to cover up his own involvement in the embezzlement. Do you have proof of his involvement? He has $850,000 in accounts that appeared right after I was arrested. Money he claims came from a non-existent inheritance. We've reviewed Mr. Mitchell's financial records. The inheritance checks out. I felt my stomach drop. What? Gerald smiled. I provided complete documentation of my Aunt Margaret's estate. She died 6 months before your arrest, left me $900,000. The probate records are all public. You don't have an Aunt Margaret. I did, my father's sister. You never met her because she lived in Ireland, but she existed. She died. She left me money, all documented. I looked at Patricia. She looked as shocked as I felt. Had we been wrong? Did Gerald actually have a legitimate inheritance? Or had he fabricated an entire deceased relative to cover stolen money? Morrison closed his folder. Ms. Mitchell, I'm going to be honest with you. The evidence Mr. Mitchell has provided is compelling. The recordings, while edited, appear to be authentic conversations. Your explanations are plausible but unverifiable, and Mr. Mitchell has legitimate documentation for his inheritance. So what are you saying? I'm saying I'm going to recommend to the grand jury that they consider new charges against you: conspiracy to commit wire fraud, money laundering, and perjury for your statements during your exoneration proceedings. This is insane. I didn't do anything. That's what a jury will decide. Again. The meeting ended. Patricia and I walked out in stunned silence. On the street, I finally spoke. They're going to charge me again. I'm going to lose everything. Again. Not if we can prove Gerald's inheritance is fake. Not if we can prove those recordings are edited beyond just cleaning up audio. Not if. My phone rang. Marcus. Lorraine, I found something. The original recordings. The full, unedited conversations. They were backed up on an old Mitchell and Hart server that was decommissioned but never fully wiped. And they prove exactly what you said. You were talking about legitimate business operations, investment transfers, confidential acquisitions. Gerald took hours of normal business conversations and cherry-picked sentences to make you sound guilty. Can you prove it? I have the files, complete with metadata showing they're the originals. And I have comparison analysis showing exactly how Gerald's versions differ from reality. Send everything to Patricia, now. I turned to Patricia. We have the original recordings, proof that Gerald edited them. That's great, but we still have the inheritance problem. If Gerald really did inherit $900,000 from his aunt, then where did the missing embezzlement money go? My phone rang again, this time an unknown number. I answered, hello. Ms. Mitchell, my name is Fiona Kelly. I'm calling from Dublin, Ireland. I'm an attorney representing the estate of Margaret Mitchell. I understand your ex-husband Gerald has been claiming an inheritance from my client. Yes, he says she left him $900,000. That's interesting, because Margaret Mitchell died in 2019. She had no estate to speak of. She was a retired school teacher who lived in a council flat. She certainly didn't have $900,000 to leave anyone, and according to her will, her modest savings went to a local charity. I felt hope surge. Can you prove this? I can send you complete documentation, death certificate, will, probate records, everything showing that Gerald Mitchell's claimed inheritance is fraudulent. Please send it immediately, to me and to my attorney. After I hung up, I looked at Patricia. Gerald's inheritance is fake. He fabricated a dead relative to cover the stolen money. Then we have him. The fake inheritance plus the edited recordings. It proves he was involved in the embezzlement and is now trying to frame you for it. We need to get this to Morrison before he files charges. We raced back to the U.S. Attorney's office. Mr. Morrison, we have new evidence. Evidence that proves Gerald Mitchell fabricated his inheritance and edited the recordings to frame Lorraine. Morrison looked skeptical, but agreed to review it. We showed him Marcus's analysis of the original recordings versus Gerald's edited versions. We showed him Fiona Kelly's documentation, proving Margaret Mitchell's estate was essentially worthless. We showed him the timeline, Gerald receiving $850, zero in inheritance, money at the exact same time. $900,000 went missing from Catherine's embezzlement. Morrison studied everything carefully. Finally, he looked up. This is compelling. If this is all accurate, then Gerald Mitchell has committed multiple federal crimes, including framing his ex-wife for embezzlement, Patricia added. I need to verify this Irish documentation, and I'll need to speak with Mr. Chen about how he obtained these original recordings. He obtained them legally from abandoned servers. We'll see, but Ms. Mitchell, I'm not filing charges against you today. I'm going to investigate Gerald Mitchell instead. Relief flooded through me. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. If any of this evidence falls apart, we're back to square one. We left Morrison's office. On the street, Patricia hugged me. You did it. You proved Gerald was lying. We did it. You, me, Marcus. We proved it together. So what happens now? Now we wait for Morrison to verify everything, for Gerald to be charged, for the truth to finally, completely come out. But as we walked to Patricia's car, I saw him. Richard Brennan, Catherine's investigator, standing across the street, watching. And he was smiling, like he knew something we didn't. Before I continue this story, kindly subscribe, like, turn on the notification bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I grabbed Patricia's arm and pointed. That's Brennan, Catherine's investigator. Patricia squinted. Why would he be here, outside the U.S. Attorney's office? I don't know, but he's been following me for weeks, and every time I see him, he's smiling like he knows something. Brennan saw me looking at him. He gave a small wave, then turned and walked away. Something's wrong, I said. We just proved Gerald fabricated evidence and framed me. We should have one. So why does Brennan look so satisfied? Maybe he's just trying to intimidate you. Or maybe Catherine and Gerald have one more card to play, something we don't know about yet. We got in Patricia's car, but I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. That evening, I was back at my office, trying to focus on Phoenix Rising Technologies. My company had been hemorrhaging clients all week because of the negative publicity. We'd lost 6 major contracts. Employees were updating their resumes. Everything I'd built was crumbling again. Angela knocked on my door. Ms. Mitchell, there's someone here to see you. She says it's urgent. Her name is Diane Foster. I don't know anyone by that name. She says she worked at Mitchell and Hart 5 years ago. She says she has information about your case. I straightened up. Send her in. Diane Foster was a woman in her 50s, nervous, wringing her hands. Ms. Mitchell, I'm sorry to bother you, but I saw the news about your case, about Gerald and the recordings, and I think I know something that might help. Sit down, tell me everything. I was the executive assistant to Catherine Hart 5 years ago, right around the time of the embezzlement. I saw things, heard things, but I was too scared to say anything. What did you see? I saw Catherine and Gerald having private meetings, multiple times, in her office after everyone else had gone home. They'd close the door, but I could hear them sometimes. They were planning something. Planning what? I don't know exactly, but I heard your name mentioned, and I heard them talking about making it convincing and making sure she takes the fall. At the time, I didn't know what it meant, but after you were arrested, I realized they'd been planning to frame you. Why didn't you come forward 5 years ago? Because I was terrified. Catherine was my boss. She could destroy my career with one phone call. And Gerald was a powerful lawyer. I convinced myself I'd misheard, that I was wrong. But I've felt guilty ever since. And when I saw you on the news defending yourself again, I knew I had to tell someone. Would you be willing to testify, to tell this to the prosecutors? She hesitated. If I do that, if I go public, my reputation in the industry will be destroyed. Everyone will think I was involved or that I'm just trying to get attention. Or they'll think you're brave. You're a witness who can prove Gerald and Catherine conspired to frame me. There's more, Diane said quietly. I kept something I probably shouldn't have kept. What? She pulled out a small recording device from her purse. Catherine asked me to record all her meetings. She said it was for note-taking purposes, but I recorded everything, including the meetings with Gerald. I kept the files, just in case I ever needed to protect myself. My heart was pounding. You have recordings of Catherine and Gerald planning to frame me. I think so. I haven't listened to all of them. There are hours of recordings, but if they discussed it in those meetings, it's on here. Can I have copies? That's why I'm here. But Ms. Mitchell, you should know, these recordings were made without Gerald's knowledge. They might not be admissible in court. I don't care about admissible. I care about the truth. Diane handed me the device. I made copies of everything. It's all on here. I hope it helps. After she left, I immediately called Patricia and Marcus. Get to my office. Now, we have Catherine and Gerald on tape planning to frame me. They arrived 30 minutes later. We locked ourselves in my conference room and started listening. The first few recordings were boring business discussions, but then we found it. Recording dated 7 months before my arrest. Catherine's voice. We need to move carefully. Lorraine is smart. She'll notice if anything looks suspicious. Gerald's voice. That's why we make it look like she did it herself. Her credentials, her signatures. By the time she realizes what's happening, it'll be too late. Catherine, and the money. Gerald, split 3 ways. You, me, and our contact. 1 million each. We move it offshore, wait for everything to blow over, then bring it back slowly through legitimate channels. Marcus stopped the recording. 3 ways. There's a third person involved. Keep listening, I said. The recording continued. Catherine, what about your wife? Won't Lorraine suspect you? Gerald laughed. Lorraine trusts me completely. She thinks we have the perfect marriage. She'll never see this coming. And even if she does suspect something after she's arrested, by then I'll have filed for divorce. I'll distance myself from her publicly. Make it look like I'm the victim of her criminal behavior. Catherine, and I'll make sure the evidence against her is ironclad. Her digital signatures on every transaction. A clear trail leading directly to her. The board will have no choice but to fire her and seize her shares. Gerald, which you'll acquire, giving you complete control of Mitchell and Hart. Catherine, and you get your $1 million plus whatever you can take in the divorce. Gerald, it's perfect. Lorraine loses everything. We get rich, and nobody will ever suspect we work together. The recording ended. I sat there, stunned. Not just by the confirmation of their conspiracy, but by how callous Gerald had been. How he'd laughed about betraying me. Patricia was already making calls. I'm sending this to Morrison immediately. This is direct evidence of conspiracy. Wait, Marcus said. They mentioned a third person, a contact who gets $1 million. Who is that? We listened to more recordings. Hours of conversations between Catherine and Gerald, planning every detail of the frame job. But they never mentioned the third person's name, just referred to them as our contact, or he. Finally, in a recording from 2 months before my arrest, we heard, Gerald, I talked to our contact today. He's ready to move the money once it's in the accounts. Catherine, is he reliable? Gerald, completely. He's done this kind of work before, and he has no connection to either of us. If anything goes wrong, he's the fall guy, not us. Catherine, what's his name again? Gerald, Richard Brennan. I felt my blood turn to ice. Brennan, Catherine's investigator. He wasn't investigating me. He was part of the original conspiracy. Marcus was already typing on his laptop. That explains everything. Why he's been following you, why he looked so satisfied outside the courthouse. He's not working for Catherine's defense, he's protecting himself. But why would he risk drawing attention to himself by investigating me publicly? Because, Patricia said slowly, he's trying to make sure all the evidence points to you and away from him. If he can prove you used the stolen money to start Phoenix Rising, then he's just an investigator doing his job. Nobody looks at him as a conspirator. How much did he get? I wondered. Gerald said $1 million each, so Brennan has $1 million hidden somewhere. Marcus pulled up financial records. Richard Brennan owns a private investigation firm. Pretty successful. But looking at his growth pattern, 5 years ago his company's revenue suddenly jumped by 400%. He went from making $200,000 a year to making over $1 million. He used the stolen money to grow his business, I said, just like they accused me of doing. Patricia was still on the phone with Morrison. After she hung up, she looked grim. Morrison wants us to bring the recordings to his office first thing tomorrow morning. But he warned me, since these were recorded without Gerald's consent, they might not be admissible. But they prove the conspiracy. In the court of public opinion, yes. In an actual court, maybe not. We need more than just the recordings. What more could we possibly need? We need to find Brennan's money. We need to prove he received $1 million from the embezzlement and used it for his business. That's physical evidence, not just voices on a recording. I looked at Marcus. Can you trace Brennan's financials? Not legally. His business records are private. I don't care about legal anymore. Marcus, these people destroyed my life, sent me to prison, nearly destroyed my company. I want them all exposed, whatever it takes. Marcus hesitated, then nodded. I'll see what I can find. Over the next 12 hours, Marcus worked his magic. By morning, he had a complete financial breakdown of Richard Brennan's business. Brennan received a $900,000 cash investment in his business 5 years ago. The source is listed as private investors, but there's no documentation of who these investors were. The money just appeared. That's the stolen money, I said. Probably, but we need to prove the money came from Catherine's offshore accounts. Patricia looked at the timeline. The embezzlement money was moved to offshore accounts in Catherine's name. Then it disappeared. Federal investigators recovered $2.1 million, but couldn't find the remaining $900,000. That missing $900,000 must have been split between Gerald and Brennan. But we only found $850,000 in Gerald's accounts, Marcus pointed out. Transfer fees, I said. Moving money offshore and back isn't free. By the time the money went through all the transfers and conversions, $900,000 probably became $850,000. So all three of them got roughly $850,000 to $900,000 each, Patricia summarized. Catherine kept hers until she was caught. Gerald hid his as a fake inheritance, and Brennan invested his in his business. How do we prove the connection? Marcus pulled up another screen. I traced the routing numbers on Brennan's cash investment. The money came from an offshore bank in the Cayman Islands, the same bank Catherine used for the embezzlement accounts. That's our proof. That's the connection. We took everything to Morrison at 9 a.m. The recordings, the financial analysis, the connection between Brennan's investment and Catherine's offshore accounts. Morrison listened to the recordings with an increasingly dark expression. When they ended, he sat back. This is explosive. If authentic, this proves a conspiracy between Catherine Hart, Gerald Mitchell, and Richard Brennan to embezzle money and frame you. If authentic, I demanded, you think we fabricated hours of recordings? No, but Gerald's lawyers will argue that. They'll argue the recordings are fake or edited or taken out of context. We need to authenticate them with forensic audio analysis. How long will that take? Weeks, maybe months. I don't have months. My company is dying. My reputation is destroyed. I need this resolved now. Morrison's phone rang. He answered, listened, then his expression changed to shock. When? Where? I'll be right there. He hung up. Gerald Mitchell was just arrested by the FBI at his home. Apparently, someone sent them evidence of his fabricated inheritance and his involvement in the embezzlement. Who sent them evidence? Anonymous tip, but whoever it was provided extensive documentation, including communications between Gerald and a forger in Ireland who created the fake inheritance papers. I looked at Patricia. We didn't send that. No, we didn't. Then who did? Morrison stood up. I need to go, but Ms. Mitchell, stay available. We're going to need you to testify when we prosecute all three of them. After he left, Patricia, Marcus, and I sat in the conference room, trying to figure out who had sent the FBI evidence against Gerald. Maybe it was Diane Foster, Marcus suggested. She had access to information from Mitchell and Hart. She wouldn't have known about the Irish forger, Patricia said. My phone rang, unknown number. I answered, hello. Ms. Mitchell, this is Richard Brennan. I think we should talk. I have nothing to say to you. Not even about who sent the FBI evidence against Gerald. I'm willing to trade information. What do you want? Immunity. I'll testify against Catherine and Gerald in exchange for immunity from prosecution. You were part of the conspiracy. I was paid to move money. I didn't know it was embezzled. I was just doing a job. You're lying. Probably, but I have information you want, and you have the power to recommend immunity to the prosecutors, so let's make a deal. I looked at Patricia. She shook her head firmly. No deals. But I needed to know. Tell me who sent the FBI evidence, and I'll consider talking to the prosecutors. Catherine sent it. She's been cooperating with federal investigators for 2 weeks. She's giving them everything, on Gerald, on me, on the whole conspiracy. She's trying to reduce her sentence by being the first to flip. Why would Catherine flip? She's the one who organized everything. Because Gerald was planning to pin everything on her. He was going to claim she orchestrated the embezzlement and framed both of you. Catherine found out and decided to get her version on record first. Her version. That Gerald was the mastermind. That he manipulated her into helping frame you. That she was just following his instructions. That's a lie. The recordings clearly show. Catherine claims Gerald coerced her. That he threatened to expose an affair she was having if she didn't cooperate. She's painting herself as another victim. I felt sick. Even now, even caught, Catherine was trying to manipulate the narrative. What about your role? I'm claiming I was an unwitting accomplice. That Gerald hired me to move money, told me it was legitimate offshore investment funds, and I had no idea it was stolen. No one will believe that. Maybe not, but reasonable doubt is all I need. And Ms. Mitchell, here's the thing. If Catherine and I both testify against Gerald, he goes down hard. 20 years minimum. But if we all start pointing fingers at each other, the prosecution's case gets muddy. Maybe everyone gets reduced sentences. Maybe someone even walks free. Are you threatening me? I'm explaining reality. You want justice. You want Gerald to pay for what he did. Then you want Catherine and me cooperating with prosecutors, not fighting them. I'll think about it. Don't think too long. Catherine's giving her full statement to the FBI tomorrow. Whatever she says will become the official narrative. If you want input into that narrative, now's the time. He hung up. I looked at Patricia and Marcus. Catherine's flipping on Gerald. She's claiming he coerced her. That's absurd, Patricia said. The recordings show she was an equal partner. But if she testifies first, if she controls the narrative, the jury might believe her. So what do we do? I thought about it, about 5 years of pain, about 3 years in prison, about losing everything, about finally having proof of what happened and who did it. We tell the truth, all of it. We give Morrison every recording, every financial record, every piece of evidence. And we let the prosecution build their case based on facts, not on whoever tells the most convincing lie. What about Brennan's offer of immunity? No deals. Brennan was part of the conspiracy. He profited from my destruction. He doesn't get to walk away clean. Over the next 3 weeks, the case exploded in the media. Catherine Hart testified to a grand jury, claiming Gerald had coerced her into helping frame me. She cried on the stand, said she'd been terrified of him, said she'd tried to stop it but he'd threatened her. Gerald was indicted on 12 federal charges: embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy, witness tampering. Richard Brennan was also indicted: money laundering, conspiracy, obstruction of justice. All 3 of them were denied bail. Too much flight risk with offshore accounts. And I was vindicated, completely, publicly, officially. The U.S. attorney held a press conference. Lorraine Mitchell was the victim of an elaborate conspiracy. She was wrongfully convicted and imprisoned. We deeply regret the injustice she suffered. And we are committed to ensuring all parties responsible are held accountable. My criminal record was expunged. My reputation was restored. My name was cleared. But I was exhausted, physically, emotionally, spiritually. I sat in my office at Phoenix Rising Technologies, looking at the Entrepreneur of the Decade award on my shelf, and I wondered, was it worth it? 5 years of fighting, 5 years of pain, 5 years of proving I wasn't finished. Angela knocked on my door. "Ms. Mitchell, I have good news. 3 of the clients who canceled their contracts want to come back, and we have 5 new companies requesting proposals." "That's wonderful, Angela. And there's someone here to see you. He says he's a reporter from Business Insider. He wants to do a profile on you for their Comeback Stories feature." I almost said no. I was tired of telling my story, tired of being the woman who'd overcome, tired of being defined by what had been done to me. But then I thought about all the other people out there who'd been wrongfully accused, who'd lost everything, who'd been told they were too old, too broken, too finished to start over. Send him in. The interview lasted 2 hours. I told him everything. About being framed, about prison, about building Phoenix Rising from nothing, about the conspiracy that had finally been exposed. At the end, he asked, "What would you say to people who are facing their own version of what you went through? People who feel finished?" I thought about that question, really thought about it. I'd say you're not finished until you decide you're finished. Other people will count you out. They'll write you off. They'll think you're too old, too damaged, too far gone to recover. Let them think that. Because when you prove them wrong, when you come back stronger than before, it's that much sweeter. Any regrets? Not fighting back sooner. I spent years accepting other people's narratives about who I was and what I deserved. I should have fought from day one. What's next for you in Phoenix Rising Technologies? We're expanding, we're hearing, we're innovating, and we're going to become the most successful healthcare AI company in the industry. Not because I need to prove anything anymore, but because we're good at what we do. The article came out 2 weeks later. Lorraine Mitchell, the woman they said was finished. It went viral. Millions of views. Thousands of comments from people sharing their own stories of being counted out and coming back. Job applications flooded into Phoenix Rising. Investors called wanting to fund our expansion. Clients lined up for our services. We went from nearly bankrupt to overflowing with opportunities in a matter of weeks. And then came the day I'd been waiting for. Catherine Hart's sentencing hearing. I sat in the courtroom, watching as the woman who'd framed me stood before the judge. Catherine's lawyers argued for leniency. She'd cooperated with prosecutors. She'd been coerced by Gerald. She deserved a reduced sentence. The prosecutor argued for the maximum, 15 years. Catherine had masterminded the embezzlement, framed an innocent woman, and only cooperated when she got caught. The judge listened to both sides. Then she looked at Catherine. Ms. Hart, you violated a position of trust. You stole from your company. You framed your business partner, sending her to prison for 3 years. And even when caught, you attempted to manipulate the narrative to reduce your own culpability. The only remorse you've shown is remorse for getting caught. Your Honor, I was scared, Catherine started. You were greedy and ambitious and willing to destroy someone else's life for your own gain. This court sentences you to 12 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. You will also pay full restitution to Mitchell and Hart Technologies and to Ms. Mitchell personally for damages. 12 years. Catherine was 69 years old. She'd be 81 when released. As they led her away, she looked at me. Our eyes met. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just looked at her calmly. Because I'd won, not just legally, but in every way that mattered. Gerald's sentencing came next. He got 15 years plus restitution. With his health problems, the judge noted he'd likely die in prison. Richard Brennan got 8 years for his role as an accomplice. After all the sentencings were complete, after all the legal proceedings were finally over, I walked out of the courthouse into bright sunshine. Patricia was with me. How do you feel? Relieved, exhausted, but mostly free. What are you going to do now? Go back to work, run my company, live my life, all the things I couldn't do while I was fighting this battle. You deserve some rest. I've been resting for 5 years, waiting for justice, waiting for vindication. Now I have it. Now I can actually move forward. 6 months after the trials ended, I stood at a podium once again. But this time, it wasn't to accept an award. It was to give a speech. I'd been invited to speak at the National Women in Business Conference. Topic: Resilience and Comeback. I looked out at the audience. 500 women, young and old, all facing their own battles. 5 years ago, I began, I was released from prison for a crime I didn't commit. I was 65 years old, broke, with a criminal record, no job, no prospects, and everyone, including my own family, thought I was finished. I paused, looking around the room. They were wrong, and I'm here to tell you that whoever told you you're finished, whoever counted you out, whoever said you're too old or too damaged or too far gone, they're wrong too. I told my story, not for sympathy, but as proof. Proof that comebacks are possible, that age is irrelevant, that being knocked down doesn't mean staying down. At the end, I said, I named my company Phoenix Rising Technologies for a reason, because the phoenix rises from ashes. It burns completely. Everyone thinks it's dead, and then it comes back more powerful than before. That's what I did. That's what you can do, because you're not finished until you say you're finished. And as long as you're still fighting, still trying, still building, you're very much alive. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. After my speech, dozens of women came up to me, sharing their stories, asking for advice, thanking me for inspiration. One woman, probably in her 70s, grabbed my hand. I lost my business 3 years ago, a scandal I wasn't part of but got blamed for anyway. I've been too ashamed to start over. But after hearing you today, I think I will. I think I can. You can, I told her. And when people doubt you, remember, they doubted me too. And I'm standing here now with a multi-million-dollar company and an award that says I'm one of the best entrepreneurs of the decade. She hugged me. Thank you, you've given me hope. That evening, back at my office, I sat alone with my thoughts. I thought about that moment at the awards ceremony, when my name was announced, when everyone who'd counted me out realized they'd been wrong. Lorraine Mitchell, founder and CEO of Phoenix Rising Technologies. They'd thought I was finished. They were so sure when I was arrested, when I was convicted, when I went to prison, when I came out with nothing. Too old, too damaged, too far gone. But then my name was announced. And everything changed. I picked up my phone and called my son James. Mom, I was just thinking about you. How was the speech? Good, really good. James, I'm proud of what I've built. Not just the company, but the comeback. The proof that I wasn't finished. Mom, you were never finished. Some of us knew that all along. Thank you for believing in me, even when I didn't always believe in myself. That's what family does. And Mom, I'm sorry about Lisa. I know she still doesn't talk to you. Lisa, my daughter, who'd believed Gerald's lies, who'd told me to just plead guilty, who'd never apologized even after the truth came out. She'll come around, or she won't. Either way, I'm okay. You sound different, lighter. I am lighter. For 5 years, I've been carrying the weight of proving I wasn't guilty, proving I could rebuild, proving I wasn't finished. Now I've proven it, I can finally just be. So what's next? I don't know, and that's the beautiful part. For the first time in years, I get to decide what comes next, not based on what I need to prove or who I need to convince, just based on what I want. What do you want? To keep building Phoenix Rising, to mentor other women who have been knocked down, to live without fear of the next accusation or the next person trying to destroy me, to just live. We talked for another hour, about his kids, about his job, about normal family things that didn't involve conspiracies or court cases. It felt good, normal. Like maybe life could finally be about more than just survival and comeback. A year after the trials, Phoenix Rising Technologies was valued at $120 million. We'd grown to 300 employees, 50 major clients, partnerships with the largest healthcare systems in the country. I was 73 years old, running a company worth more than Mitchell and Hart had ever been. And I was happy, really, genuinely happy. One morning, I came into work to find a gift on my desk, a framed newspaper article. The headline, Lorraine Mitchell, the woman who refused to be finished. Below it, a handwritten note. Thank you for showing us that age, prison, and betrayal don't define us. Our comebacks do. Your Phoenix Rising team. I hung it on my wall, right next to my Entrepreneur of the Decade award. 2 symbols of the same truth. They thought I was finished, but I wasn't. Not even close. Because being finished is a choice, and I chose to rise. Again and again and again. Until there was no doubt left. Until my name was announced not as a victim or a convict or a cautionary tale, but as Lorraine Mitchell. Entrepreneur, CEO, Phoenix. The woman who proved them all wrong. If this story touched you, please subscribe, like, and turn on the notification bell for more emotional stories like this. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Somewhere out there, I might be reading.